Prince Edward just revealed a royal secret no one saw coming. In a rare emotional confession, he exposed years of silence, pain, and being overlooked inside the royal family. His words weren't scripted, and they've left the entire UK stunned. This isn't gossip. This is the truth behind the crown. The confession that no one saw coming. It happened on a Tuesday evening during what was supposed to be a quiet charity event in Surrey. Nothing flashy, just another royal appearance. But then, without warning, Prince Edward did something no one expected. He put aside the script and spoke from the heart. There was no press release, no palace approval, just a raw, emotional moment that froze the room. One woman in the audience described it as like time stopped. Edward stepped forward and said, "Sometimes silence becomes too heavy." That one sentence changed everything. In front of stunned guests, he revealed something deeply personal, something no royal has ever admitted publicly. Within minutes, reporters were buzzing. Whispers turned into headlines. Prince Edward just said, "What?" It felt like a crack in the royal shield had finally appeared, and the emotion poured through. This wasn't staged. It wasn't royal polish. It was the real man behind the royal title. And that vulnerability sent shockwaves across Britain. As that moment sank in, the audience had no idea the storm that was about to unfold in the next part of his story. A life overshadowed by royal duty. Without naming names, but leaving no doubt, Edward revealed what it was like growing up beside Prince Charles, Prince Andrew, and later Prince William. He didn't sugarcoat it. "I was told to stay in the background," he confessed. "Just support. Don't speak." He called himself the invisible royal, never the heir, never the rebel, just expected to keep going quietly. Over 4 decades, he kept his head down, but inside, questions built up. Was he just a placeholder? Did he ever truly belong? His voice cracked as he said, "There were days I looked in the mirror and didn't see a prince. I saw someone left behind." The room remained silent. This wasn't gossip. This was grief. Years of emotional pressure finally let out. He admitted watching big royal events from the sidelines, clapping for others while burying his own doubts. The weight of always being second, or third, or fourth had finally caught up. As he paused, hands trembling slightly, the next line landed like thunder. "I wasn't just overlooked. I was forgotten." But this was only the beginning. What came next would open up a side of Prince Philip's legacy no one saw coming. The weight of family expectations. For years, the name Prince Edward rarely made headlines, but what he admitted that night, in just a few quiet minutes, completely changed that. He opened up about the unbearable pressure of carrying his father's legacy after being granted the title Duke of Edinburgh in 2023. It was supposed to be a moment of pride. But for Edward, it brought something darker. "I didn't feel honored. I felt haunted," he said, his voice shaking. From the day he received the title, he said he felt like he was walking through a shadow, one that belonged to Prince Philip, a man known for toughness, formality, and never showing weakness. But Edward, he was different, and that difference, he revealed, was never truly welcomed. He confessed that during his younger years, whenever he showed emotion, he was told to toughen up. Even in private, affection was rare. "I don't blame him," Edward said, referring to his father. "But I always felt like I wasn't enough. Not for the job, not for him." The pressure wasn't just about the title. It was about being the son who was supposed to carry the torch. But no matter how hard he tried, leading over 70 public engagements a year, supporting youth and arts charities and never stepping out of line, he still felt invisible. His most painful line? "My loyalty was seen as silence, my strength as softness." The crowd listening didn't breathe. For many, it was the first time they saw the price of quiet dedication behind the walls of Buckingham Palace. Edward admitted he often stood back while others took the spotlight. Charles, the heir; Andrew, the scandal; William, the future. He was never the story, until now. And while he never complained in public, he said he spent decades battling the feeling that his work didn't matter, that his presence wasn't essential. "I was part of the picture," he said, "but I was never in focus." It was in this moment that the audience realized this wasn't just a confession. It was a lifetime of bottled-up pain finally being let out. But the moment that truly broke him wasn't about titles or legacies. It was about something far more personal and far more heartbreaking. The moment that broke him. There was a pause, a breath. Then came the part that left the entire room in silence. Prince Edward described the night he nearly walked away from royal life entirely. It wasn't just stress. It was emotional collapse. It happened shortly after Prince Philip's funeral in April 2021. Behind closed doors, a family meeting spiraled into something else. Edward didn't name names, but heavily implied that Prince Andrew was involved. The topic? Inheritance, titles, legacy. But more than that, it was about being heard. "I was told I didn't have a say," Edward said. "Not because I was wrong, but because I was me." He remembered sitting alone in a drawing room inside Windsor Castle. No guards, no aides, no cameras, just him, surrounded by portraits of royals who always seemed to matter more. He said, "I cried, not as a prince, not as a duke, but as a son no one remembered." His words were slow, deliberate, like every sentence cost him something. He revealed even Sophie, his wife of over 20 years, hadn't known the full weight of what he'd been carrying. "I smiled through it all, but inside, I was crumbling." What shattered him wasn't one argument. It was the realization that even in grief, family politics came first. That there was no room for his voice, even when mourning his own father. "I felt like a guest in my own bloodline," he said, and several people in the room reportedly gasped. That was the moment he considered leaving it all behind. The duties, the appearances, the palace walls. He said he stared out the window that night and wondered, "If I disappear, will anyone even notice?" But just as he was about to give up, something changed. A conversation, one that no one outside the family ever knew about. A private moment with Queen Elizabeth just weeks before her death that pulled him back from the edge. And what she told him would become the words he'd cling to in his darkest hours. Speaking about Queen Elizabeth's final words to him. Just when it felt like his confession couldn't get more personal, Prince Edward revealed a moment so private, so raw, that many in the room were visibly emotional. He took a slow breath, then spoke of one of the last times he sat alone with Queen Elizabeth II, just a few weeks before she passed in September 2022. "It was quiet," he said, voice trembling. "No titles, no staff, just mother and son." They were in Windsor, sitting near the window, looking out at the grounds where Edward had played as a child. That's when the Queen, in her famously calm tone, said the words he would never forget. "You've always had a quieter strength, Edward. I saw it, even when others didn't." Edward admitted he didn't respond at first. He just nodded and looked away so she wouldn't see his tears. It was the first time I felt completely seen, not as the spare son, not as a shadow, but as me. He went on to say that in the months after her death, those words became his anchor. Whenever he felt sidelined or overlooked, as he often did, he'd return to that one moment, that one sentence. "She didn't say it for the cameras," he added. "She said it for me." What stunned the audience wasn't just the memory, it was the fact that he shared it. A royal revealing something so intimate, so emotionally charged, was almost unheard of. Some guests wiped away tears. One woman whispered, "It felt like we were in the room with them." But the calm didn't last. Because even though the Queen saw him, Edward confessed that her death changed everything. His quiet connection to the crown was gone, and the family, he said, felt colder than ever. That led to the next painful chapter, the shift in his relationship with King Charles, and the growing distance that came with it. Behind palace walls, his strained relationships. After the Queen's passing, many assumed the royal family would pull together. But Edward told a very different story, one the public never saw. He revealed that after Charles became king in 2022, everything changed. Meetings he once attended were now held without him. Messages, he claimed, went unanswered. "I wasn't expecting a promotion," he said, "but I didn't expect to feel pushed aside either." He admitted feeling increasingly excluded, especially when it came to decisions involving his late father's legacy. From event invitations to official planning, his name was often left out. He said he once found out about a major family announcement from the news, not from the palace. Even more shocking, he hinted that the divide wasn't just professional. It had turned personal. Edward said that he and Charles had gone weeks without speaking, despite living just miles apart. "I stayed loyal," he said quietly, "even when I felt like I was standing outside my own family." He didn't lash out. There was no anger in his voice, just hurt. He admitted that Camilla had become the king's closest advisor, and while he held no grudge, it left him feeling even more distant. The most heartbreaking line: "I didn't lose just my mother. I lost my place." Royal watchers were stunned. For decades, Prince Edward was the dependable one, the steady hand, the quiet supporter. But now, we were seeing the cost of that silence. And as he wrapped up his confession, he made one final plea, one that may change the future of the monarchy itself. His plea for change in the royal family. After laying bare a lifetime of emotional neglect, hidden grief, and quiet suffering, Prince Edward could have stepped back. He could have ended his speech with silence, like so many royals before him. But instead, he leaned in. What came next was not just personal, it was powerful. It was a message aimed not only at the crowd in front of him, but at the entire monarchy. With the room still frozen in disbelief, Edward looked out into the stunned faces and said clearly, "It's time we stop pretending emotions don't exist behind palace walls." It hit like lightning. This wasn't the Edward the public thought they knew. The quiet one, the dutiful one, the shadow in the corner of royal photographs. This was a man speaking for every royal who never got the chance. He admitted that the monarchy had spent decades building its image on stoicism, control, and silence, but that silence came at a cost. He said the crown had taught generations to swallow their pain, hide their feelings, and put duty before heart. And then came the sentence that changed everything. "I've spent over 40 years doing things the right way. But what has that silence cost us, as individuals and as a family?" There was no bitterness in his voice, just pain and purpose. He made it clear. He wasn't turning his back on the monarchy. He wasn't attacking the institution. But he was asking, begging, for it to finally evolve. He urged senior figures to look ahead, not backwards, to protect not just the crown, but the people behind it. Edward called for space within the family for emotional truth. He named no enemies. He pointed no fingers. But he asked that younger royals, like Lady Louise, Zara Tyndall, and even Prince George one day, be allowed to speak, to feel, to be real. "We have traditions worth preserving," he said, "but not at the cost of our humanity." The air in the room shifted. For a moment, no one was watching a prince. They were watching a man fight for the future of his family. One guest described it later as watching a dam break and realizing it needed to. Edward didn't sugarcoat it. He warned that if the silence continues, it will only create more damage behind palace doors, more emotional wounds, more distance, more forgotten voices. "I don't want sympathy," he said. "I want change. I want a family that speaks, that listens, that heals." It was the most honest, unscripted appeal from a royal in recent memory. And it didn't feel political. It felt deeply personal. That's why it resonated so deeply. He wasn't grandstanding. He wasn't performing. He was pleading for openness, for honesty, for something real inside a family built on restraint. And that heartfelt plea didn't just echo through the walls of that event hall. Within hours, it lit a fire across the country. Social media exploded. Newsrooms rushed to cover the moment. People started whispering the same question. Has the monarchy just met its emotional turning point? Because Edward didn't just speak his truth, he might have just changed the future of the firm. Public reaction, outpouring of emotion. By the next morning, Prince Edward's words were everywhere. Clips, quotes, and emotional reactions flooded the internet like a wave. By 9 a.m., the hashtag #WeHearYou. Edward was already trending across Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. But what stunned the palace even more than the confession itself was the public's overwhelming response. People weren't just watching. They were feeling it, connecting with it. Many admitted they had overlooked Edward for years, writing him off as the quiet one, the royal who smiled politely in the background while louder stories took center stage. But this time, he had spoken, and the world was listening. One post read, "He's the royal I never noticed until now." Another said, "For the first time, I saw not a prince, but a man, a brother, a son." Even celebrities, journalists, and royal experts weighed in. Piers Morgan called it the most emotionally intelligent royal moment in decades. A BBC analyst said it was more powerful than any documentary or interview, because it was real. Perhaps most surprising was the reaction from anti-monarchists. Many who have long criticized the royal family applauded Edward's courage. One wrote, "I'm no royalist, but that took guts. He humanized the crown in a way no one else ever has." In just 24 hours, the leaked video had over 2 million views on social media. News outlets across the UK, and even international platforms, ran special reports. Radio hosts opened phone lines for public callers. One woman, through tears, said, "I saw my own father in him, the quiet one, the one who held everything in." Royal forums that had long been quiet about Edward suddenly lit up with support. Posts praised his decades of under-the-radar work, his loyalty to the Duke of Edinburgh's award, his consistent youth outreach, and his presence at over 70 engagements a year after year. It was as if the nation had collectively remembered the man they had ignored. But behind palace gates, the reaction was far more tense. Some senior aides were reportedly furious about the speech, calling it too honest, too emotional, and too disruptive. A rushed statement followed, insisting it was a deeply personal moment, not a policy shift. And still, King Charles remained completely silent. No comment, no appearance. That silence only made headlines louder. Was it anger? Disapproval? Or something the public wasn't being told? Meanwhile, Sophie, Edward's wife of over 20 years, released just one line, but it said everything. "I've never been prouder of him. He spoke the truth, not just for himself, but for many." Later that evening, Lady Louise, their 22-year-old daughter, was photographed leaving Windsor Castle, reportedly heading straight to her father's side at Bagshot Park. Paparazzi said she looked emotional, but composed, determined. Inside sources revealed that several members of the extended royal family were shaken by the confession. One unnamed aide said, "There's a divide now. Some think Edward went too far. Others think he finally said what everyone's been thinking for years." Either way, something had changed. The palace could spin, soften, or silence, but the people had already seen it. They had seen a new side of Prince Edward, and they weren't going to forget it. Because what started as a quiet confession had become a national awakening, and there was no going back. How Sophie, his children, and the palace responded. While the public reaction was fast and emotional, the most telling signs came from inside the royal household itself, and the silence from some corners spoke volumes. Just 2 days after Prince Edward's emotional speech, his wife Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, broke the quiet with a single-line statement. No PR spin, no palace signature, just truth. "I've never been prouder of him." Sources close to the family said Sophie had no idea Edward would speak so openly that night. But when he did, she stood behind him without hesitation. One aide told reporters she held his hand backstage like it was the first time all over again. Meanwhile, the spotlight quickly turned to their children, especially Lady Louise Windsor, now 22, who was photographed leaving Windsor Castle just hours after the confession went public. She was reportedly on her way to join her father at their Bagshot Park home, looking somber but composed. A friend of Louise told the Daily Express that she had always seen her dad as gentle but underestimated. Their son James, Earl of Wessex, now 17, has remained out of sight. But insiders say the family has closed ranks around Edward in the wake of the speech. As for the palace, that's where the temperature changed. Senior aides quickly labeled the moment as deeply personal and not reflective of wider royal sentiment. They tried to paint it as a one-off moment, not a movement. But behind closed doors, tension was rising. King Charles III, who had just returned from a brief overseas visit, reportedly refused to comment, both publicly and privately. His silence fueled headlines. Was it disapproval, distance, or something deeper? Multiple insiders claim that Charles was caught off guard by Edward's comments and hasn't reached out since. The king's closest circle, reportedly led by Queen Camilla, is said to be concerned about setting a precedent. Still, not everyone inside the palace saw it as trouble. At least 2 senior royals, unnamed in the press, were said to be moved by Edward's vulnerability. One source shared, "He said what many of them feel, but have never dared to say." So now, the family stands at a quiet crossroads. No official statements, no scheduled meetings, just questions hanging in the air, and a noticeable shift in how the public sees the man they once called the forgotten royal. But what happens next? Could this one emotional moment truly impact the future of the monarchy? The answer may already be unfolding. What this means for the future of the monarchy. What started as a private confession has now grown into something bigger, a turning point for the British royal family. Whether the palace wants to admit it or not, something shifted the night Prince Edward broke his silence. For decades, the monarchy survived by staying composed, formal, distant. But Edward's speech, unscripted, vulnerable, and painfully honest, showed that maybe that model no longer works. Not in 2025, not with this generation watching. Millions of people, from royalists to Republicans, saw something they never expected: a royal bleeding through the cracks. And instead of breaking him, it made him more relatable than ever before. Edward may not wear the crown, but in one speech, he did something more powerful than any official decree. He made the monarchy feel human again. This wasn't scandal. It wasn't rebellion. It was emotional truth. And that hit harder than any tabloid story ever could. Royal insiders are now quietly acknowledging that the firm may need to evolve, or risk falling even further behind the people it claims to represent. In fact, some palace aides have begun discussing emotional transparency protocols for future public engagements, a first in royal history. Younger royals like Princess Beatrice, Lady Louise, and even Prince William are said to be watching this moment closely. There's a generational divide here, one insider explained. The older royals still think silence is strength. The younger ones, they know the world has changed. For Edward, this moment may mark the beginning of a new role, not in terms of title, but in meaning. The royal who once stood in the background is now leading a quiet revolution in how the monarchy connects with the people. And the UK is responding. From schools using his words in leadership discussions, to charity groups quoting his call for openness, his confession has sparked something real. One royal commentator said it best: Edward reminded us that the crown isn't just worn. Sometimes it's carried, and he's been carrying it in silence for far too long. So where does this leave the monarchy? Shaken? Possibly. Stronger? Only if it listens. But one thing's for sure. After this, Prince Edward will never be overlooked again. Prince Edward's confession shattered the image of royal perfection. No longer the quiet spare, he's become a voice for change inside the monarchy. The UK is listening, and the firm can't ignore it. After this moment, one thing is clear: Prince Edward has finally been heard, and the silence is broken.